the secret Minecraft features that you might not know existed, starting with, by building a structure made out of gold blocks, cobblestone, and a nether reactor core, you could build yourself the so-called nether reactor, which was a feature that only exists in old versions of Bedrock Minecraft. And once you went through all those steps of building it, then what would happen is that you'd get this message telling you it was active, for it generated this massive structure of netherrack around it called the Nether Spire. And in a version of the game where you couldn't go into the nether dimension actually, this was a solid substitute. But as soon as there was an actual way to go into the nether dimension, there wasn't really a point for this, and it's been lost to time. It doesn't take a lot of redstone know-how to understand a pressure plate, but while we're all familiar with these, this might catch you off guard. See, while it is true that both mobs and items can weigh down these things, an item frame is a rare sight. Though, surely enough, if you place one like so, we can overlap the hitboxes and effectively create a permanent switch on like so. And what's cool about that is that it opens up the door for a nearly invisible redstone signal, and that's what I'd highly recommend for keeping your redstone lamps lit on the lamppost. I mean, it certainly looks a lot better than a lever, that's for certain. Most of the time, locking a chest in Minecraft is a luxury that only creative map makers have. That is, until you add our furry friends into the equation. By having your cat sit on top of a chest, it is impossible to open up the thing. And what's even better is that you can kinda hide this system by having a piston push a non-solid block on top of the chest. That way, if your friend's trying to open up your chest to steal your valuables, at least your feline companion's gonna keep it safe. They're not exactly ferocious lions by appearance, but sure enough, they still can do the job just alright. From version 1.8 to 1.13 of Minecraft, there existed a special option in the world building settings. Or should I say options, because when you clicked on this custom world builder menu, it allowed you to customize a whole bunch about your Minecraft world. Like the ability to change the sea level, the dungeon count, whether you had villages or not, and a whole bunch more. It makes a lot of sense for a sandbox game. Honestly, I'm surprised that it's been cut out entirely. But seeing the kind of horrors that you can generate with this world type, maybe that's for the best. Now, it's commonplace knowledge by this point, you don't place a bed in the nether. I mean, that's just intentional game design. But then it might be a surprise to see this not explode in the end. See, what's happening here is that in Bedrock, it's actually possible to disable this intentional feature through a hidden command. And now in 1.18, we can keep our beds safe by changing the game rule respawn blocks explode to false. And then whether we're interacting with the bed in the nether or respawn anchor in the overworld, neither will explode anymore. And even though we still can't sleep in them even with this changed, at least the villagers can. In the early versions of Minecraft, animal breeding was buggy to say the least. So much so that if you wanted to breed your cows or your sheep, you could do that while they were 8 blocks away, and with a fence wall in between them, which is definitely a glitch, but it kind of proves that love knows no bounds, so I think that's kind of sweet. When pistons were first added in, they had a lot more errors about them. And one of the reasons this would happen is that it would only take 1 redstone tick to activate them, meaning with a fast enough clock, you could glitch them out like so. But later on, Mojang would double the amount of time that it would take them to extend, but they could still retract instantly. Privacy is a hot topic these days, and for some players, it's the most important thing. So to abide by that, Mojang's got you covered. See this option labeled Allow Server Listings? Well, toggle that, and now you won't show up when someone checks the server. And that'll let you enjoy the game, all without being swarmed by your adoring fans. Most of the time, we see vines as the inferior ladder. I mean, have you tried climbing a jungle tree using one of these? It's not always the easiest. But in recent times, vines have gotten a lot more interesting to use. As you can see, we can now climb these without supporting blocks, letting us ditch the mobs and bail right up to the treetops. Here's how I completely ruined my friend's redstone door without them even knowing how I did it. Since, as it turns out, you can actually fully break levers in Minecraft without actually breaking the item. It's a bit complicated, but by spam clicking on the lever in a contraption that looks like this, that'll eventually leave it completely useless, leaving them to stand outside their base wondering why nothing's working. And they'll be even more confused when they break in to see the redstone and see nothing was actually ruined. Instead, we just made the lever a bit dizzy. Enderman and water don't mix. Then it makes sense that since 1.11, they'll take 1 hit point of damage when they're hit by a splash bottle of water. Baby zombies are annoying, but they used to be so much worse. Back in 2012, they would just chase you around forever, since no matter if it was day or night, they wouldn't burn in the sunlight. And in fact, that wouldn't be added in until 1.13, which was a lot of updates of having to deal with these ankle biters. And now thankfully they take after their parents and say their goodbyes when it's daytime. The crafting menu is one of the most useful features added to Minecraft in recent years. But it turns out it's not just useful for crafting, since if you were to type in the phrase excited Z into the crafting table search bar, then it changes your text in the game to the pirate speak language option. So if for some reason you're trying to speedrun this and you don't want to go all the way over to your languages options in the settings, you could just do this. But I don't think there's a way to turn it off through the same method, so I hope you be liking pirate speak, you scallywag. Since beta 1.8 of Minecraft, if you were to dig down into the void and stand on top of bedrock, you'd notice that down around those lower Y levels, there would be a void fog that would cloud up your vision, until eventually you reached to the bottom and it was pitch black, which I've gotta say made branch mining a whole lot scarier to do. And that's probably why this feature was removed in snapshot 14W34C. But since then, Minecraft worlds have gotten twice as deep. And honestly, with the deep dark, I feel like having void fog in the game again would make some sense. I mean, it doesn't fit with the old Minecraft textures, but with Deep Slate, I think it does the job. One of the oldest versions of an item elevator in Minecraft actually had to do with glass blocks. And that's because the way that Minecraft items interacted with transparent blocks is that if you dispense something vertically into a stack of glass blocks, then it would actually get transported up into the top, where you then divert it into an item stream and get it over to whatever hopper system you would use. It was pretty cool. However, when water elevators were introduced in the form of bubbles, using soul sand, then this was no longer needed and it was discontinued. And while the bubble system's a lot more intuitive, it also was a lot easier to just carry around glass and do it this way than having to build a whole water tunnel full of source blocks to do it in the recent updates. It's hard for me to say that I don't miss the old version sometimes. Some changes might be hard to notice until you take that closer look. Like this change to the way that chunks render. Now, they work in something of a cylinder pattern instead of the square one from before. And hopefully, even if it is hard to notice, it should help make the game run that little bit smoother. Ever wondered how much damage you deal to a mob? Well, surely some of you must, because there's so many mods out there that exist to show you a mob's health bar. But really, you can see this within the game as well, because when you attack a mob and they display the heart particles, if you actually took the time to count those, you notice that they're not just for show. They actually display the exact amount of damage that you dealt to the mob. Now, granted, they show up pretty quick and they sometimes overlap, but sure enough, if you deal 5 hearts of damage, you're gonna see 5 hearts pop up above that mob's head, which is a pretty cool effect, but even knowing this, I doubt I'm ever gonna take the time to count it. I'll know how much damage I've dealt to a mob when they die. If it's not enough to kill them, then it's not enough for me. Sure, the Anvil is a great item, but it's definitely got its share of limitations. And while most of us are familiar with the too expensive limit on level costs, there also exists a character limit for item names. Though the problem started to be that some items that were added in already had too long of a name, such as the new waxed, lightly weathered cut copper stairs at 41 characters. So to avoid that hassle, the limit has now been changed from 35 characters right up to 50. Nobody likes going slow, and even less like to be slowed down. So for that reason, it would always be a pain if you would brush up against a wall and then you'd stop sprinting. But from now on, don't sweat it, as now small angles like this will let you sprint just the same and finish up the parkour just as planned. Although elytras are great for transportation, they're obviously not much when it comes to protection. But ever since 1.19.4, that's been a little bit more easy to bear with, since now you can swap the equipped gear that you have in your hotbar just by right-clicking them with your hand. So in an instant, you could switch from your traveling elytra into your battle chestplate and be a lot better equipped for any bad guys that come your way. And then if you're not ready for the fight, switch right back to the elytra, go for your rockets, and get out of there. You definitely got a lot of options on how you can tackle this. In the past, if you emptied a water bucket inside of a cauldron, there was no way to remove it. And the only way to get the water out of the cauldron was to break the cauldron and replace it, since using water bottles or an empty bucket couldn't do anything on it. Which makes it seem like cauldrons have been useless for a whole long time. And maybe it's true that they're more useful for lava these days than they've ever been for water. Did you know that within the game's code, these little flowing pockets of water inside of caves actually have a name? Yeah, I wouldn't have looked for it either, but apparently they're called springs. So, cool. Suspicious Stew can be quite the toss-up, unless you know how to play your cards right. If you're smart with your flowers, then you can essentially make these into discount potions for regen, saturation, and more. But up until now, you couldn't use them on a full stomach. Though, in current versions of the game, we're able to slurp these down without a hassle, even if the hunger bar is full, letting you get some night vision even if you're stuffed. It's no secret that lava's the water of the nether. Or I guess with glitches, water's the water of the nether, but at least the intended way, lava flows about the same speed that water does in the overworld. But it's only recently that lava's been changed to push entities when it's flowing, and that's allowed for much better nether farms that we can see here. In the past, a blaze farm would have to look like this mess with a bunch of pressure plates and pistons. Now you just add in some lava, it's a lot cleaner, and it makes more visual sense too. Along with the changes to the nether, soul sand also got a much cooler, more laid-back cousin. Because whether you're using it for a basalt generator or soul campfires, soul soil just generally seems like less of a burden. But the question is, can it spawn withers? And as you can see, it works just the same, making this an even better replacement for the sand of the past. A handful of Minecraft textures tend to go unnoticed, but some of that is intentional. For instance, how would you ever notice that the nether update gave redstone a bottom texture if 99% of the time you can't even place this item unsupported? So if you didn't notice this, I don't blame you. I didn't either. But now we both know where to find it. This here is a balloon, but what might shock you is just how powerful this thing is. And while we'll get into how you get the ingredients to craft one of these, there is a lot of possibility here, both as a decoration and a bit of a school prank. Because even though we can tie this entity to a wall or a fence to keep it grounded, it's when we tie it to a mob that it really starts to get silly. See, in the Education Edition, you can get these guys to lift right off the ground, but unfortunately, you can't attach these to monsters, so there goes the killing method. But if it means anything, you can still pick up an iron golem, so that's kind of funny in its its own right. And if you have yourself a bow and arrow or a trident, you can even shoot down the balloons to pop them. Minecraft jukeboxes have always been a redstone item, but they've never always played well with redstone. And up until recently, it was completely impossible to use things like dispensers to put music discs in and hoppers to take music disc out. But as of 1.19.4, finally this implementation's added to our jukeboxes, letting us loop the music over and over again, or until you get copyright striked. Yeah, sorry about that one. If you have trouble fighting mobs at night, then you might want to brew up some weakness potions, since surprisingly so, these can render a lot of mobs completely useless. And you'll see as much if we use it on a zombie. They will still do their attack animation, however, you don't even receive a damage tick or a knockback when they do it. And folks, that's on hard difficulties. And it's not just zombies either. This will happen for slime, spiders, and even silverfish. And perhaps my favorite yet, if you use a weakness potion on a cave spider, that'll prevent it from poisoning you too, which really makes these ankle biters seem a lot less intimidating when you use it like that. Okay, let's play a game of Spot the Difference. Looking at these two comparators, one 1.17 and the other 1.18, which is the recent version. Well, zoomed out like this, it's hard to tell, but with a closer look, now we can see that the powered comparator in 1.18 got some red pixels added to the texture. This is a Minecraft feature that used to exist, got broken for many years, and then now has been fixed again. Since in the early days of Minecraft, it was made so that when you took damage, your camera would tilt in the direction that the damage came from. But strangely enough, this was broken when LAN was added into the game. Shavoxa goes into way better detail about this line of code than I ever could. What's interesting is that in recent updates, it's actually been fixed again. And honestly, after over 8 years of being broken, it practically feels like a new feature. I'm sure to a lot of players it felt like it. Eating a pufferfish isn't a great idea. Not only is the poison gonna leave you with a damaged life bar, but the nausea isn't that fun either. But that latter effect has actually gotten some changes. Instead of giving off nausea 2, pufferfish only give off nausea 1 when consumed in 1.16.2. That doesn't make any difference, so it's just a pointless change. When a player gets hit in Minecraft, they turn red. That's something that's been consistent all the way through. But prior to 1.8, if you wore armor as well, then that armor would also take that red shader on top of it. But nowadays, it doesn't nearly hurt as bad, and we're the only ones who have to suffer from a punch. Even after a big overhaul like the 1.14 texture update, there's still plenty of tweaks to be made to Minecraft's design. So with each update, you're sure to see a couple of sprites get a subtle change. And here that lands to item frames, as now these will have a birch-colored frame to match their in-world model. Fire doesn't usually seem like a good thing to add to your builds, but sure enough, using these pyrotechnics properly could really add to the atmosphere. And one way to make sure that fireplace really impresses is with the help of a campfire. See, by placing one of these under your netherrack like so, the smoke particles will still rise through the top, letting us supercharge the smokestack and add to the aesthetic what we're going for. And hey, with a hay bale underneath the campfire, that effect can get even meatier. Just make sure none of your pets or friends happen to wander into the flame. Otherwise, that's gonna be tough to justify. Drowned are famous for prowling around the various rivers that we've got on the surface, but you're less likely to see some of these in the caves below. At least, you wouldn't until now. But with the addition of aquifers next to dripstone caves, these mobs can now spawn in the underground, giving their zombie cousins a bit of competition. With the recent scale attribute command, we're able to change our size to as small as 0.0625 times what it was. And with that, this user had the great idea of making a mini parkour course that we could do at our small scale. And now, what used to be simple jumps and gaps for us when we were regular sized, become almost impossible feats at this small scale. And being able to run through things like gaps and stairs is particularly funny to me. Or having to land a neo jump while you're basically landing into half a block's worth of space. I don't think I could land one of those jumps if you gave me all the space in the world. But for an idea in a new parkour map, I think this is just asking to get used. And even better is that we could also scale ourselves up the other way, make an entire giant parkour course where you're jumping from skyscrapers. Both of them will be great to see. Carpets are a staple for Minecraft building, and odds are that you've seen plenty of floors using the standard 16 variants. And while that's nice, this trick can help it to go a bit further. See, signs are capable of overlapping the carpet's hitbox like so, meaning we can use the pattern of the different signs underneath to essentially detail our carpets from below. And then, with all the different wood types to use, the possibilities start to get pretty ridiculous. So if you're looking to avoid having yet another bland throw rug in your living room, this might be a better alternative to consider. And it's quite easy to pull off, so that's not a bad thing either. When you're killing a bunch of mobs for XP, it's easy to lose focus, which is a shame, because when you take the time to actually get a breather, then you might just notice that these experience orbs have recently changed their look. As of recent versions, these bubbles are now transparent, which doesn't make too much of a difference since we still pick them up the same way, but hey, now you know. It feels like every Minecraft update, we seem to get a new MLG save, whether it be powdered snow buckets in 1.17, the warped vines in 1.16, and now our wind charges in 1.21. Since if you were to time an input with a wind charge right at your feet before you hit the ground, that little burst of air will completely negate all fall damage that you were taking to that point. It resets your fall, and you're gonna be completely fine. Which, considering you're able to use these in all dimensions, not just the overworld in the end,
I think that's also pretty cool too.
We've definitely got to talk about the glow stick next. Here, by using polyethylene, luminol, and dye, we can make our very own handheld glow stick. And we've got all 16 colors of dye to choose from. And while you can use these in your hand to light up as you expect, it doesn't actually function as a light source, but instead just particle effects. And after a while, its durability decreases and it burns out.
When you come across an igloo, you're not really seeing many villagers. However, they're still classified as a village. And so if you were to have the bad omen effect and then start to climb down the hatch inside of an igloo, you could actually start a raid, which is a pretty raw deal for you and that villager that's stuck down there. I mean, having to be trapped next to a zombie village is bad enough, but then to know that all you have to look forward to when you escape from that prison is a whole bunch of pillagers up top, yeah, I can't say I'd be excited about leaving either. Getting flint and feathers for arrows already feels expensive to craft, but it could have been so much worse. Since in the past in Alpha 1.0, you would actually use iron ingots to craft arrows instead of flint, which makes more sense for why these arrow textures have a white tip, but until you get a good iron farm, that would have been just way too costly. Good thing for Fletchers, I guess. And our arrows haven't just gotten cheaper, they've also gotten slower. Since back in Beta 1.8, it was possible that if you held down the right click with a bow in your hand, you could actually spam fire out arrows like this, which I'm not gonna lie, that is pretty satisfying, but I can definitely see why this changed. And it's funny to think that crossbows were the one that got the quick charge enchantment when it seems like our bows were quick charging just fine on their own before the enchantment was added. Giants in Minecraft have not worked in a very long time, and that's intentional. They were left in the code, but they were intentionally given no AI. But now with the scale attribute command, we're able to take a zombie and then scale it up to giant size, and it'll have AI. You can even use the attribute commands to change its speed, its health, basically making your own boss mob inside of your world. I just wouldn't recommend doing like this user and giving it speed of a scale 3. Something about a giant zombie freaking out at the top of a ravine is horrifying in any update. I'm glad Mojang never added in this version of the giant.
Every classroom's gonna have its own rules, and that's where the allow and deny blocks come in. Now, as you can guess by the name, these are blocks that you can set up as an educator to place specific areas where players can or cannot build. Think of it like selective spawn protection, and that way a teacher could set up a plot for their class to build, all without getting the classroom griefed. I think that's a fair trade-off. Nowadays, command blocks are indestructible, but that wasn't always the case. And in fact, when they first came out, you could place them and even mine them in survival. Though even though you were able to place and move around this block, you couldn't use it unless you were in creative mode. And after 1.6.1, you couldn't even do that. So really, it wasn't that useful of a block if you're in survival. If you play Minecraft on PC, you're probably not familiar with this, but for those of you who played Minecraft on console, this is instantly recognizable as the Minecraft tutorial world. And it's probably a bit nostalgic because this hasn't been in the game since. But in this iconic world, you'd find the classic Minecraft logo built across the sky with a whole bunch of tutorials underneath to teach you the details of Minecraft. But as charming as this was, it was removed from the game eventually, and now the only way to get it is by downloading a map.
Parrots don't just imitate the sounds of other mobs, they also imitate their path. And that'd be why a horde of parrots will follow other mobs around when they see them in the wild. And they'll even target individual mobs, so that where the mob goes, they follow. Which I guess given the fact that the monkey lost the China exclusive mob vote, this is basically the closest that we have to monkey see, monkey do. And hey, parrots are also in the jungle, so I guess that fits.
Here's one setting that you'll want to turn off, because if you go into your visual settings and turn off the biome blend slider, this will allow you to easily see the biome borders between the difference in grass and water color, which is pretty handy when you're looking to build things within a specific biome, like a squid or a drowned farm for instance. And honestly, it's a much quicker alternative than using the F3 debug screen. And since that debug screen doesn't even exist in all versions, I think you'll find that this is a lot more user-friendly.
With the ability to now ride minecarts through nether portals, we're able to make it so that you can board your nether travel system in the overworld and end up on the other side on another overworld track. Which, even though it isn't as fast as riding an iceboat highway through the nether, it literally requires no input from us. Just get into the minecart and that's it. You can be hands-off eating chips if you want. And to me, that sounds like a much more enjoyable ride. I mean, as long as you pick good chips. What would you call this item? Now, if you guessed pottery shards, you're both technically correct and technically incorrect. Since when these were first added into the game, Mojang originally called them pottery shards. But when the community pointed out that this is actually not the technical term, they instead changed this to pottery shards. And so both names have technically been a name for this item, so I doubt anyone's gonna get too mad at you when you pronounce it wrong. Especially when the official one looks like it's a typo, if anything. I think as long as you preface it with pottery, people are gonna get what you mean. Now, when you see a hostile mob spawn in a village, you're probably not paying much attention to your villager. villagers. I mean, after all, you want to deal with the threat. However, if you take a close look, you can actually notice that when villagers are nervous, they'll begin sweating and emit water particles above their head, which I think is a really cute detail. If anything, it's just a smart way to reuse this particle effect in a different way. But it might be hard to get a villager stuck in one place long enough to see this, because also when villagers get scared of a zombie, they'll start running even faster than the player can at max speed. Yeah, they get a little scared and that's all the inspiration they need. It's never worked for me. I get scared in a chase scene, I'm lying down dead. I'd rather go out in peace. When the enchanted table was first added into Minecraft, the early versions of it actually showed that it wasn't made out of obsidian, which begs the question, what was it made out of? Well, cobblestone. Yeah, doesn't seem as magical, right? And if you look at the original texture, it really didn't seem that way either. I mean, there wasn't even a red carpet put on top like this, though there was a version of that was added in, though still with the cobblestone. It looks more like the bottom of a piston than an enchanting table. And while I will admit, it would be nice to be able to craft a cheaper enchanting table, I could barely get obsidian in a PvP server as it is. But if it means I have to look at this, I'm much gladder that we have the actual current design. If you've ever messed around with the potion effects in Minecraft, you're aware that there's something called the luck effect, which even though you're not able to get it through a potion, it's an effect that's able to change your luck that you might have with certain loot tables. And so it makes sense that at one point Mojang added in a new status effect called bad luck, which would have just done the opposite, but it was never followed through on. However, there is still a texture file for this effect, looking instead like a withered 4-leaf clover. But honestly, even if they didn't add this in officially, I think plenty of us have experienced bad luck in Minecraft. We don't need to add on to that. To most, finding out that Minecraft isn't infinite is already a letdown. Sure enough, if you go 30 million blocks in any direction, you're gonna find out that there is something that stops you. And what is it in recent versions? A world border, which is a far cry from how interesting this used to be back in the older versions of the game. Since back in the beta versions, we could have found something called the Farlands, which the fact that it's still a Minecraft legend and most players have come in after these were around speaks to how cool they are. It's an important part of the game's history, and it's unfortunate that it's left into these old decrepit versions. Prior to 1.11, as you wore down the durability on one of your tools, not only would its health bar decrease, but the colors of that health bar would get less and less vibrant as it went along, which honestly, I think you gotta pick one or the other. And Mojang seemed to agree, since now the durability colors stay vibrant all the way through, from a fresh diamond pickaxe to a broken tragedy.
Dark mode is all the rage these days. From your Discord to your desktop, it's the main way that we operate. And while there are texture packs that add in things like a dark mode inventory and UI, Mojang also threw their hat in the ring with this update. Now it's possible to go into the accessibility settings and enable a dark mode monochromatic start screen, which is gonna make playing late at night a lot easier on the eyes. Plenty of players in Minecraft want minimap markers. I mean, that's definitely the reason it's in every Minecraft mod pack I've ever seen. But a feature that passed most people by is that by right-clicking on a banner, you're able to add it onto the map and show exactly where it is, which can create some really interesting and detailed maps if you want, especially when zoomed out. Better yet, throw a name on that banner, and then as soon as you right-click on it, you'll actually see that custom name on the map. So if you're trying to find home, you don't have to wonder where it is. Just look on it and, oh, there it is, home. If you're building your mob farm without an armor stand, then you're doing it wrong. Since strange as it may sound, having an armor stand set up like this in the middle of your mob farm makes it so that when you use a sweeping edge sword, you don't have to worry about wasting one of your swings on dying mobs. Since anytime that you attack a mob with sweeping edge and it dies on the spot, then it just absorbs the attack without doing anything else. But attacking an armor stand alleviates this, and that gives us the best option for crowd control. And it also means that if you're swiping at the armor stand, you're not going to take any thorns damage from any mobs that happen to spawn with it. So if all it costs is a training dummy to help you deal with these other dummies, then that's something I'm willing to take. Lava is not the best for visibility, but when you're in spectator mode, it's just frustrating to be blinded. Well, thankfully with 1.17's slew of changes, that restriction also got lifted. So going forward, be prepared to properly spectate the Nether Fortress battle. Nothing's going to hold you back.
During the initial snapshots for the crafter, Mojang had originally made it so that this block had no cooldown when being powered, which might not sound like a big deal, but you only have to look at this example from the technical Minecraft subreddit to see that it was quickly overpowered. I mean, with a fast enough clock, you could quite literally make yourself a shower of these things. And while I admit that would have been awesome for compacting stuff in our iron farms, it was not what Mojang was intending for the block. And so in snapshot 23W46A, they would then change it to have the same delay as dispensers.
If you take the time, NBT data can be a lot of fun to mess around with. And fortunately, 1.17 added even more fuel to that fire, if you want to call it that. Now, it's possible to give entities the tag has visual fire, which does right as it says on the tin. With this, you can make an entity look like it's on fire, but it won't take damage or burn the same as a real flame. And while I'm not sure it's practical, it is weird enough to try. If you played Minecraft back in the day, then you know that these boats would break all the time. But part of that was by design, since in 2012, you could only exit a boat or minecart if if you broke the vehicle. And without the ability to left shift to dismount, that means that we could cause certain situations where you softlock yourself in that boat, completely unable to get out. Which is definitely the saddest way to lose your hardcore world. That's just brutal.
The copper horn. See, originally added back in the 1.18 snapshot versions of Bedrock, they were ultimately removed before the 1.19 full version. And the reason given is that they just didn't satisfy the developers. So what did they do? Well, besides giving another use for copper, which is appreciated, they're meant to be more of an instrument that you could learn how to play, as opposed to the regular goat horns, which just played a preset sound. And while I think some players might have learned how to use this for some pretty great Minecraft remixes, it seems like Minecraft musicians are still limited to their note blocks. With the World of Color update in 1.12, a lot of our dyed items changed color, and they weren't the only ones to do it, since the shulker boxes also got a whole new set of colors. And personally, I kinda like how some of the original colors look for the shulker boxes, but it's hard to say that the new ones aren't more true to the actual dye colors, so I get why the change was made.
By this point, we're all familiar with the trick to turn your animals upside down by using a dinnerbone name tag. But in this update, that's been tweaked a bit. And now when you feed your flipped over friends, they'll look up at the food instead of down like they used to, though the sheep still don't work. When we first started using them, ender pearls did not have a cooldown to them, so you could throw them continuously, which usually resulted in taking a lot of damage. But if you had feather falling boots, it was a fun way to get yourself out of trouble and right back to the action, completely transforming a version of PvP. Though in 1.9 it was changed so that they had a cooldown and that you could use them in creative mode, which I guess is a trade-off. Roller coasters are a great thing, but in 2012 they were a nightmare, since the rails, no matter which way you placed them, would always be positioned on a north by south axis. And the only way to fix that was to add in more rails like so, which is a nightmare to say the least. And surprisingly, this took up until 1.15, where now it finally places facing the player, which is a bit late, but still better than the alternative. Before the update Aquatic in 1.13, any items that you threw into the water would all float down to the bottom of the ocean floor. But nowadays, they thankfully will all float up to the surface and bob in place. Back in the day, the end dimension used to look like a mess. And I'm not talking about the old endstone texture, but rather the obsidian pillars that would spawn there were scattered and unorganized back in the day. And really, it's hard to appreciate this one until you look at a side-by-side, because now with the ring of pillars, it looks so much better. And I'm sure that Sandiction's build wouldn't have looked nearly as good if this didn't get fixed. Lapis lazuli is kind of the odd one out when it comes to Minecraft minerals. I mean, it's arguably the least useful, since it's just for enchanting and dyeing, and it's by no means the most rare or hard to find. It's just kinda there. But Mojang seems to have fixed one bit of separation in the recent update. And now, instead of crafting 9 lapis into a lapis lazuli block, it's called a block of lapis lazuli, to match the other minerals. Not only were the oceans boring back in the past, but they also used to be way too big. Since back in the day, you could travel for thousands of blocks and not come across any side of mainland, which made it a big problem if you happened to spawn on a survival island like so, which is why this got changed in 1.7.2 so that the ocean sizes were limited. Clearly, Minecraft is a great game, which is why it's always nice to see more accessibility options added in. So, for one example, if you don't want to be left out of the text conversation, then 1.12 has you covered. Simply hit Control-B, and now chat will be narrated for easy listening. Simple as that. Using the right tool to break a block is usually straightforward, but what's weirder is when certain blocks don't require a tool at all. And for a time, the conduit was in that category, though from this point, they can only be broken with a pickaxe, which I think makes sense anyhow. Sometimes, the different item names can be easy to lose track of, and it seems that even Mojang knows this. That's why, as of the Nether update, the clay block and the clay item that you get from breaking it now have a distinction. Since then, these have been called clay balls, which is probably what you called them anyway, so the change makes sense. If you need to quickly get rid of some fire in the Nether, then a good way to do that is by brewing up a couple of splash water bottles, since these not only extinguish ourselves when we catch on fire, but they can also clear this plus sign shape out of the fire that catches on the ground. So if you need to make sure that your items don't burn, it might help to throw down one of these. That way, even if you burn alive, at least your stuff won't. Phoenix SC also discovered this particularly weird sound that used to exist for Minecraft Steve. Now, the sounds for Steve have changed quite a bit, and while I've lamented the fact that he doesn't say oof anymore when he gets hurt, I'm particularly glad that this sound was left in the past, since there was an unused breathing sound for Steve that was in Minecraft's files at one point, and that's particularly creepy to listen to when you play it. This isn't the kind of ASMR that I'm looking for while I'm playing Minecraft. The block sounds are satisfying. Steve's blocked lungs, not as much. But for an April Fool's update, if they ever wanted to do this, I think that'd be kind of hilarious, if not at least very intimidating. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?